diving into the latest market turbulence, explaining how tariffs might delay deals, and examining whether AI could become a lifeline for businesses looking to do more with less. Plus, we'll discuss why standardization might become a liability and how flexible billing models could help providers weather the storm. Jay McCall and Karl Palachuk join me today. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and I'm Dave Sobel. We'll be taking questions and comments throughout the show, so make sure to put them in chat. If you have a question, we will happily respond to it. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. A reminder, I am watching the chat and I'll keep an eye out for questions. Jay McCall is a seasoned editor and journalist with over 20 years of experience in B2B technology journalism. He's the co-founder of Managed Services Journal and Dev Pro Journal, where he provides valuable insights and guidance to IT solution providers and managed services providers. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Great to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. We're going to mix it up today. Karl Palachuk is a distinguished author, speaker, and consultant with over 25 years of experience in the IT services industry. He's recognized as a pioneer in the managed services business model and has authored more than 20 books, including the influential Managed Services in a Month. He's also my co-host on the Killing It podcast. Karl, welcome to the live show for your first appearance here.
Thank you. It is great to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, I am looking to mix it up with you guys today a little bit. Now, let's set a couple of ground rules because timing really matters on what we're talking about. We are talking on Wednesday about 3 p.m. Eastern. Less than 2 hours ago, the tariffs that we've been talking about earlier in the week with market dips were put on a 90-day pause, and the ones with China are now raised to 125%. Some of you may be listening to this recording, which is going to drop on the podcast feed in a day or two, and so things may have changed. Now, I will think it's important that we're going to have a conversation broadly about the impact of tariffs, because that's not something we have normally talked about in the IT channel. And Karl, I'm going to ask you first also because you've got a really interesting initial take on all market conditions that I think is advice that's worth starting with.
Well, thank you. I think, part of what happens in any slowdown or recession or whatever, anytime there's economic uncertainty, there's a couple things you have to remember. First of all, your clients are going to want some advice and you need to become the advisor. And the second thing is you are, as Michael Gerber says, an economy of one. So you have to focus on your clients, focus on your employees, focus on your products, your little business. No matter, it can be $20 million, but your business needs to focus on exactly what you can control, because you don't control hardly anything else in the rest of the world. So, I just really encourage people to double down on taking care of their employees and their clients. And to that end, I've pushed forever since day one. You should be having regular meetings with your clients. Help them get through whatever's going on, even if it just means, hey, I will listen to you, right? Like literally on a very personal level. I will listen to you and I will help you if I can. And if things get bad, well, let's make sure that we go through this intelligently. Some clients will also have extra money to spend, and they're waiting for a downturn so that they can gobble up some new technology and be ahead of their competition when the smoke clears and everybody else starts buying again. So, you don't know what's going on with your clients until you sit down and ask them and have those conversations.
Now, that is exactly the place that I wanted to throw to Jay a little bit here. So, Jay, I know you're doing the same sort of thing that I'm doing, which is listening and talking to providers right now over the past couple of days. What are you hearing in terms of the kinds of concerns that they've got?
Well, what's going on now, Dave, reminds me, I think back, when else in our lifetimes have we seen this kind of turmoil happening, and I'm reminded just, 5 short years ago, back to the pandemic, and even, much earlier back in 2008 with the the recession we went through with the housing market collapse. And I think there's going to be, several parallels, this time around, even though each one of these crises in our economy, came about for, different reasons, with the um, 2008 housing market, happening because of many poor loans that weren't being funded. And then, of course, the pandemic, with the coronavirus, and now through these tariff wars. But I think the parallels are going to be that you're going to see some companies that are going to, um, you know, want to retract, want to, maybe they had some larger scale IT projects that were in the works, but they're going to delay those, and some things will get canceled. However, like I think Carl alluded to, that there will be, like we saw during the pandemic, that was a time when we saw a big uptick with the digital transformation. People were couldn't go into the office, so we saw a big rise in the unified communications technology spending. And I'm thinking there's going to be similar things happening this time around, um, perhaps with AI, and we can get into that a little bit later. But those are kind of some of the things I'm starting to see right now. We're kind of early in on this particular crisis, and like you mentioned, we have got a little bit of a reprieve here with the 90-day pause on things. However, just like a lot of these economists have been predicting, there's I'm sure they're not going to change their projections about uh, what this means for this year. I mean, there's still a lot of uncertainty happening because of this. So I think as a result, we're going to see some parallels from the previous two crises.
Well, I was with you. I'm with you exactly on that because I think it's the volatility of what's happening right now that I think is the most concerning. One of the pieces, I'll note that the announcement that came, less than 2 hours ago was that this is a pause, not a reversal, with an implication that they are still hanging out there, and the markets don't like uncertainty. Carl, I know you operate. You and I both operated MSPs during the 2002 downturn as well as the 2008 one. We both ran businesses through the COVID downturn. Are there particular patterns of buying behavior or strategy that you're kind of anticipating or watching for during these times of volatility?
Well, all the pundits want to say, is there a parallel to 1987, a parallel to 2002, or whatever? I will say there's a quiet lesson that a lot of people experienced and didn't learn in the 2008, 9, 10, 11 recession. And that was this. Well, over on one side, Microsoft was introducing Server 2008, right? Launching all this kind of stuff. And people are like, oh, no, we got to buy all these servers, got to buy all these servers. Skip ahead a bit. When we came out of that recession, the cloud had exploded. Everybody who was uncertain said, well, I'm not going to buy hardware. I'm going to put stuff in the cloud. And nobody really paid attention to the fact that there was resistance to the cloud for a lot of businesses, especially at the small end, for 10, 15 years. And, you and I preached for 10 years before that, get to the cloud. Remember when we did that show? And then the recession happens and everybody moved to the cloud. And when it was over, Microsoft was literally announcing, well, there's just like, now we're ready for Server 2011, but not that many people bought into the last product. So we're not sure what we're going to do. And I think we're going to see something very similar here. I think that what we're going to see is a lot of people say, I'm unsure about how I source hardware if I can't get it from China and I can't get it from any other country because of tariffs, and everything's going to be different. And that uncertainty will drive them to cloud services. And now it becomes Amazon's problem or Microsoft's problem or whoever's providing cloud services. How you get me that technology becomes your problem and not my problem. So I think we're going to see another huge move. The people who aren't in the cloud already are going to put a lot more services there. I would be leery about tariffs on services, which has not gotten a lot of play yet, but that will be a specter we have to deal with at some point.
Now, I want to do a follow up there before I move on to the AI opportunity, because I think Jay alluded to it and I think we want to go there. But I actually want to get a little bit of insight. Carl, I'm going to ask you first on this. I've been thinking a lot about the idea of standardization with prices particularly fluctuating a lot on potential tariffs here. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is the idea that MSPs really lean into the idea of standardization, particularly when we think about hardware. And we've kind of moved to this idea of hardware being really commoditized. Well, one vendor's choice of their supply chain may make a real difference in their end user pricing over the next 12 months. I already reported on the show that, one manufacturer framework who is very consumer focused has already paused sales of particular lines because they can't make predictions about their supply chain. Are you thinking about the impact of standardization to the way MSPs deliver hardware in a world where it's not all the same anymore on a price perspective? How does that work?
Right. Well, and in some ways it's interesting because both the cloud and AI give us the opportunity to say, look, what do clients want? They want results. They want an endpoint. They want something that will make their business better. How we get them there changes over time. And I do think this is an opportunity to say, all right, let's standardize on what the outputs are, not the systems we use to get you from point A to point B. Clients only bought a server in 2000 because we sold it to them, right? They didn't want a server before that. Then we convinced them of it. Then they didn't want the cloud, but we convinced them that they need the cloud. And so it'll be a great opportunity for somebody to say, okay, what are the systems that can standardize this? What are the systems that we can develop so that MSPs have something to sell that they can rely on and that they don't have to worry that the prices are going to go up 50%, 25%, whatever. We need predictability. Unfortunately for me, I've always advocated short contracts, not 3-year contracts, but longer contracts help you to stabilize prices. But now we're in the era where that also might mean that the people signing the other side of the contract might be out of business and won't be able to fulfill the 3-year contract. So it is an opportunity for us to figure out what our opportunities and options are. And the world will look different when this is over. Do not think that we're just going to go back to what we did before. Jay mentioned the pandemic. Everybody talked about we can't wait to get back to what we have. The world does not go back. The world only moves forward. And so you have to think about what the next reality is and not worry about the last reality or getting back to it. It's gone, right? It's gone.
Right. We live in the new one. And Jay, it's clear you've been giving some thought to what the new one looks like. And you brought up the parallel to the pandemic, and this idea of during that time, there was this idea of 10 years in a very short period. Yeah. Do you think there's much, like you mentioned AI, do you think this is a parallel moment with AI? Is that where people may be leaning into, or is there something else on your mind in terms of trends to be looking at now?
Yeah, there's a couple different, technologies and trends that I've been, following, and I'm wondering if they either both or either one could become what we saw with unified communications back in 2020. And one of those is agentic AI, and I know you've talked about that a little bit on your shows and covered it recently, and it's something it's I'm starting to hear more and more about it as vendors are releasing agentic AI products, and so basically this is kind of, for those that maybe it's newer to them, this is kind of like the next maybe iteration of AI with so it was generative AI that took the world by storm a few years ago, with what we know now, Chat GPT and Gemini and so on, that just had an undeniable, change in all of our lives. So with agentic AI, you think of AI powered agents that can plan your next trip overseas and make all travel arrangements, human like bots that act as virtual caregivers for the elderly, for example, or AI powered supply chain specialists. So in other words, it's kind of taking that what we've known as chatbots to the next level. So these agentic AI bots can act more autonomously to achieve goals without the need for constant human guidance. So that's very interesting and very promising technology. One estimate that I saw recently suggests that this market, it's currently was valued at a little over $5 billion last year, 2024. It's expected to reach almost $200 billion by 2034. So just huge growth potential there. So it's very promising technology. However, if I could just share one story that I was working with a very large MSP recently, helping them to develop some educational materials that they want to share with prospects. And I think it kind of illustrates, it'll help better explain why I'm a little on the fence with this technology. So
Okay.
This MSP was working with a very large U.S. city that was looking to make a major upgrade to its contact center, right? So it's 311 contact center. So 311 is all for non-emergency stuff.
Right.
So this is so they have this legacy on-prem contact center technology, and their call center agents were being overwhelmed. They handle they serve over 8 million residents, support 175 languages. So you can just give you a sense, this is a very large operation.
Sure.
And this MSP came in with a proposed solution with a major cloud provider. It's not yet public. It's supposed to go live here in June. So hopefully
early teaser then for everybody.
Yeah, a little teaser, right? So they put together a proof of concept with this major cloud provider, and interestingly, another major cloud provider also, wanted in on the action. So, and they went directly, wanted to work directly with this major large city. Long story short, this MSP, they were listening to the client and put together a proposal that allowed them to keep their existing on-prem contact center solution, and then it worked with this cloud provider. They took a few extra steps to put guardrails in with their AI solution, so that it only looked at the call center database, whereas the competitor, another major cloud provider, seemed like they just kind of opened up the system to the entire internet. Well, long story short, in the proof of concepts, the MSP, because they'd taken the extra time to put in the guardrails and do things right, they got much better outcome with the proof of concept. Whereas the major cloud provider, and it's almost mind-boggling to think that this happened. They had serious issues with AI hallucinations happening. So, in other words, someone would contact, call into the center and, asking for something about like how to get a permit to upgrade their electrical service for a business or something. And it was giving incorrect information, right? Because they didn't take the time to lock it down. And I think the story illustrates a couple of really critical things. That number one, I mean, the thing that's exciting to me is that this is a scenario of an MSP winning a very large deal, over $15 million deal. And even though they're larger than themselves, but compared to the cloud provider they were going against, I mean, it was several times bigger than them. But they took the time to really listen to the client, understand the needs, and do the extra work to really get this AI under control. And in that environment, it can work and do wonderful things. Surprisingly, the much larger cloud provider didn't do that and just kind of tried to stiff arm the end user into like, hey, you're going to need to do a rip and replace, and we're going to go all in on the cloud. At the end of the day, their proof of concept was filled with problems. So I guess I think about this in terms of agentic AI is that it's got huge potential, but it isn't a scenario where you just implement this technology and it's going to do everything uh, for the customer. There's potential huge problems if MSPs don't put in the right guardrails like this MSP did. And I think that's an important takeaway, especially at a time like this, where, like Karl talked about, this is an opportunity where companies are going to be looking to make strategic investments like this. But this is also an opportunity for MSPs to really make sure that they understand these technologies rather than just
Right.
implementing it and hoping for the best.
Yeah, and Jay, it's really interesting because in the time of agentic AI may be a good motivating factor, a preview for those watching live. By the way, if you're watching live, throw in a question or a comment into the chat because we will definitely take it. But a preview for those of you watching live on today's news show, I actually talk about the fact that Spotify just made a big set of announcements about the way that they're going to go hiring going forward. They're only going to hire in cases where it's been proven AI can't do the job. And additionally, they're rolling AI into performance reviews of all of their employees going forward to show that the use of AI has been linked to their job descriptions. And I find this kind of really interesting to think about it. But Karl, as I sort of think about this, one of the things thematically that I keep hearing from everybody that I interview to talk about this is the fact that there's a lot of data preparation work that needs to happen before these agents and AI are ready. I know you spent a lot of time talking in your community with MSPs about this. How prepared are providers to offer like the data readiness and data governance work required to be effective to make agentic AI even work?
Well, I'd say today most MSPs are not prepared or even close. And part of the problem is they're waiting for somebody to come up with the killer app. But sometimes the killer app is you have to do the work.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, the reason that we really have to separate, the generative AI from agentic or analytical AI is that, you can get away from the hallucinations by simply saying, look, I have a very clear job I want to do. For example, I want to analyze all of the meetings I've been in on Zoom, so I need to get those attendance reports. There's an API, there's a reporting function in Zoom. I just need to figure out how do I connect that to my internal database, get the data in, and run some very specific questions. It's sort of like you could spend some time programming that in SQL or whatever, or you could do that much programming and let AI figure out how to do the rest. That's a skill, that's a task, that's a thing that you could create and do. But you can't keep selling exactly what you've been selling for the last 10 years and expect something different to happen. You've got to go to school. You've got to get that new skill set, and you have to, invest in your clients and in your personnel because your people can do all of this, but it's not going to happen by itself. You have to take the steps. And, I like to remind people, everybody knows this, but the best time to start was 5 years ago. Second best time is today, right? So it can be done, and you do have the skill set to learn much faster than your clients. And once again, it's all about have those meetings, customize solutions for your clients and for what they're doing. Don't just keep selling the exact same stuff that you've been selling, because that will not be good for you in the next few years.
Now, I'm going to ask both of you this one because I've been thinking about it a lot. I feel like we're going to be in a period of time where there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. In fact, I think there could be an argument made that for many who are implementing and managing the economy right now, the uncertainty and turbulence is a feature, not a bug. Right. And I think that but for most of us in business, we like consistency and stability because it allows us to make decisions around that. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about now, and I'd love to hear from audience, if you've got thoughts, throw it in the chat. But what I've been thinking about is the idea of how much flexibility in business models makes sense as things become more uncertain. Because customers, Karl, you alluded earlier, like customers maybe not would sign a 3-year contract. Maybe they want to sign only a year, or maybe they want month to month, or maybe, heaven forbid, some of them are going to want to do things on more of an engagement or a reactive perspective. And providers may be tempted to go that way or start making changes to their models as things become uncertain. Do you have particular thoughts on how effective that might be, Karl? Throw it to you first. Like, as you think about this, like, are you comfortable with that flexibility?
Yes, I will say this. So first of all, this is not the time to lower your prices and compete on price. In
Right.
particular, because of the last thing that I was saying, which is if you just keep selling the same thing, if you've got your three-tiered price list and it is what it is, and you got your hammer and everything you look at looks like a nail, well, that's not going to serve you well. But to the point of what Jay was talking about with the example of talking to the client in excruciating detail about exactly what they need, you got your managed services over here. That's the background. That's the basis that gets you in the door. The customized solution that actually makes the client more productive, more effective, more profitable. That is what will get you into the inner circle of that client, and they will rely on you as a trusted advisor as you go through not just the technology changes, but the business changes. I think a lot of IT consultants don't really take pride in the fact that if you've been in business for 5 or 10 or 15 years, you know something about business and you can help your clients on that front as well. It is okay to give them advice and to dig into the business side of their business, because that's where you can make tremendous changes. And once you're on that inner circle, they will rely on you, and they will certainly not want to get rid of you because at some point you need to charge them an extra 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000.
Jay, how much are you thinking about the idea of flexibility in the business models during this uncertain time?
Yeah, I first of all want to say I agree 100% with Karl. This is not a time to. So while companies are going to want flexibility, and where you can be flexible, certainly like I think Karl talked about earlier, so maybe instead of like a 3-year agreements that you're quote unquote locking someone into, maybe those could be shorter so you can have flexibility in some of those areas. However, I agree 100% and can't emphasize this enough, because I think it is a major error or problem that happens during these kind of times is the pressure or the temptation for IT solution providers to lower their prices. But just as we've been talking about, if you do that, we're not going back after that. So after we come out of these difficult situations, if you've lowered your price, I mean, no one's going to come back to you and say, "Oh yeah, we expected you to raise the prices back on." Once people get used to that lower price, they're going to say, "Hey, you could do it then. We expect you to do it now." And it's just a slippery slope to the bottom. I don't know who originally coined this analogy about, with the managed services being like, baking a cake, is that, when you sell a cake, you're not selling the individual ingredients, you're selling the whole thing together, that whole experience. And that really, I think, kind of sums up what it is to be a managed services provider. It isn't just about the backup and disaster recovery and the RMM and all these different components, but it's the whole experience you're providing. That's the value that you're providing your customers. And, that remains so important, especially during these times where, as even Karl talked about earlier, that customers are going to be leaning on you even more for your expertise to guide them through these difficult times.
Well, let me point out that every technology vendor that I've been talking about is talking about either raising prices or doing their best to keep them constant.
Yeah.
Nobody's having a conversation about dropping it.
One of the luckiest things we ever did was in January of 2008, we raised our rates at the time to $165 an hour, which even today, a lot of people aren't charging that, and they should be.
Right.
But it's sort of like, but when the crash happened in October, we didn't turn around and lower them. We just rode out the recession, making a bunch more money.
And there's real math in that too. Like, for a lot of people that know, like, you can actually raise prices, lose a little bit of customers, but actually still do better with what you're going. Now, guys, I know we could go all day long, and I've got one other surprise for listeners. But for each of you, I want to make sure that if people have questions or follow up, where's the best way to get in touch with them? Jay, how can people reach out?
You can find me at my website is managedservicesjournal.com, or also you can find me on LinkedIn.
And Managed Services Journal is a great resource. I use it in the preparation of my show. And Karl, how can people get in touch?
So I'm at smallbizthoughts.org or smallbizthoughts.com. And of course, I would be very happy to connect with everybody on LinkedIn.
Well, guys, this has been a fantastic conversation. We've hopefully given some people some thoughts of stability, even during the time being a little bit crazy. But for listeners, I have one other set of perspectives I want to offer on this. I had a chance to talk with Peter Kujawa of Service Leadership, who's known, of course, for their benchmarking of IT services providers. Now, we were talking about some other topics, but I knew we were going to talk about tariffs today, and I had the chance to ask him his take on tariffs and their impacts on MSPs and VARs. Now, note, I talked to him yesterday, Tuesday, before the tariffs changed, but I think his perspective is broad and really continues to be meaningful on his thought about the economy in general. So let's get Peter's take.
I think there's a good reason to believe that the economy is going to slow down, possibly go into a recession. How deep of a recession, we don't know yet. The story is really unfolding as we speak. So I don't think MSPs, most of the MSPs that we benchmark are 50 to 60% managed service revenue as a percentage of total revenue, and another 15 to 20% of their revenues coming from recurring cloud. Well, neither of those things are going to be affected at all by tariffs, right? The only thing that will be affected by tariff will be non-recurring product and to an extent the project labor that goes along with doing the projects tied to that hardware. And so there's definitely an impact. I'm not trying to mitigate or not trying to minimize it, but for MSPs, there's a reason why so much private equity money has come into the space in the past few years. Amongst other reasons, one of them is that the industry's been viewed as pretty recession resistant. I hear the term recession proof. I don't agree with the use of that term, but I do agree with the term recession resistance. Why? Because of the percentage of revenue that's coming in from managed services and recurring product for MSPs. So first of all, I think our industry is well positioned to withstand whatever comes along, and the average MSP should be pretty well positioned to withstand it as well. But that being said, in the Great Recession, we saw managed services revenue drop by about 20% for MSPs during the recession. Okay? And where did that drop come from? Well, it came from a few places. Number one is there's definitely some of your customers that are going to go bankrupt, right? So hard recession, deep recession, you're going to have some customers that won't survive it. Those customers, 100% of their revenue will go away. Number two is you're going to have some customers, regardless of how well they're doing, come in and ask for discounts. And those discounts in COVID were really common. A lot of times they were given on a short-term basis, or maybe they were tied to a back-end extension of the agreement or something in return to the MSP. But definitely there's going to be some pressure to reduce pricing, at least in the short term. The biggest impact, though, will be from your customers shedding jobs. So if you've priced your services as an MSP on a per user basis, and most have, if your customer gets rid of 10% of their workers, well, you just lost 10% of your users. And so that's where most MSPs are going to see the biggest impact. Again, there's good news. The good news in this is that it'll take 2 to 3 quarters for that to really hit MSPs. It's not something that you wake up, there's an announcement that there's a recession on Friday, and you wake up on Monday and all of your customers have made reductions in their teams. It just doesn't work that way. It works over a period of time. So do we think that might happen? Yes, we think that could happen, maybe 10, 15, 20%. So if I'm an MSP, I'm going to be really focused on building my efficiency. I'm going to be looking at ways that I can become even more profitable before some of those pressures come on. I'm also going to be paying really close attention to whether I'm adding or losing seats every month so that I can make quick decisions on staffing. I might delay, maybe there was an FTE we were planning on adding because of growth, or maybe there's somebody that we lost that we were going to backfill. well, maybe you should hold off on that for 3 months and see what happens, and just really be careful on adding additional cost to your organization. Um, the other lesson we've learned in past recessions is that these do create some opportunity for new customer growth. So make sure you continue to invest in sales and marketing, that you're really focused on growing. Ultimately, the economy will correct itself. We've seen it happen every time. And if you've been doing the right things, you can maintain your profitability throughout the recession and be really well positioned to pull yourself out of it and grow out of it quickly when the recession lets up. Now, Dave, I know you have some VARs who watch your show as well. Um, those folks, it's a different message. The impact on project revenue, if there's a recession, or the kind of shocks that we saw recently in the stock market with the tariff announcements, those kind of announcements or recessionary pressures, those create an incentive to end customers to hold off on doing projects. And they can cut a project with an email or a phone call. You can't just get rid of managed services. You need it to run your business. You need to make sure you have security in place, etc. But I don't need to do that project that we were going to do. I can wait on that. And so the project revenue, including non-recurring product like hardware and the associated services revenue that does the projects, that drops fast. That's typically about a 40% drop, and we see that in 1 to 2 quarters. So there, I'd be really careful, again, on my staffing. Do I have project engineers that are not going to be utilized for the next couple of quarters? Maybe I shift them temporarily to my managed services team instead of backfilling some managed service positions I've got. Maybe I need to make a reduction in that team if I think it's going to be a longer term recession. But act fast, because the impact will be fast. And if you wait a quarter or two to see how things shake out, you're going to be taking a significant hit in the meantime.
Now, I thought Peter's insights into projects was also relevant for MSPs, particularly because we know best-in-class MSPs have a portion of their business that is projects. And additionally, we've been talking a lot about the idea of Windows 11 upgrades this year. Now, Peter will be featured in an upcoming interview discussing his solution provider compensation report from Service Leadership. Look for that soon, and my Patreons will get that interview early. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation, and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to learn more. And listeners, here's how you can support the show. Like, share, and follow on your favorite platforms. It makes a huge difference, and it's the #1 thing you can do if you like this kind of content. And if you want to support directly on Patreon, use our Give What You Want model. You set what you think the content is worth, and you get access to my interviews and videos early. If you have a question and are listening to the recording, send it in at question@mspradio.com. Thanks for joining me for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.